This is the coldest loading bay I've ever been in. I hope that bucket has heat inside because I'm losing the feeling in my toes. Is that the door? You're in my way, kid." This was one of those days, the annoying kind. The kind when nothing went wrong exactly, but 100 little tiny things didn't go right. Like at this moment, there was a hole in Leonard McCoy's left shoe. He'd gotten dressed in the dark this morning because his eyes were tired. That was because he stayed up too late last night studying for an exam on the Orion respiratory system, and he'd accidentally put on an old pair of shoes that he had intended to throw away. Now they were on McCoy's feet. Every time he took a step, cold air was sucked into that hole, blasting the side of his foot. And there, in the middle of the loading bay, was the Zodiac-class warp shuttle all warmed up. He was finally going to be able to settle down in a quiet, warm vehicle and read a book. But there was something in his way. The uniformed individual he'd just asked to move aside. McCoy noticed the kid's face, fair-skinned with a touch of outdoor ruddiness, topped by buff-colored hair. The hazel-eyed teenager wore the typical tinsel-gray shirt of a Starfleet Academy student. The traditional color had been around almost 100 years and was meant to imitate the shimmer of water off Point Bonita Light at the entrance of San Francisco Bay. The fabric had been chosen by one of the first Starfleet admirals, inspired as he looked out over the bay past the 1877 lighthouse. That was when they had decided to locate Starfleet Command in the Academy in San Francisco. The younger fellow didn't seem impressed by McCoy's gruff attitude. "I'm not a kid, sir," the kid said. "I'm a cadet." McCoy nodded briskly. "Good for you. Pardon me." But the cadet stayed in the way. "Sorry. Regulations say you can't board any Starfleet vessel without proper authorization." "Starfleet vessel?" McCoy looked at the scout ship. It was a banged-up box with 2 sausage-shaped impulse engines running the whole length of the hull and extending beyond the small crew compartment. On a vessel this small, the hyperlight engine system made up almost half the craft's weight. It was hardly a Starfleet vessel in the way this kid was referring to it. "What do you mean I can't board?" McCoy demanded. He palmed his brown hair back and wished he'd gotten a haircut yesterday. "You're not allowed to go on board. That's the rule, sir." "Look, Strongarm, have you given any thought to why that rule exists?" "No, sir." "That code is to keep people from wandering onto ships of the line and full-size transports, not 2-ton taxicabs, Corporal." "That's not what it says, sir. It says any Starfleet vessel, and I'm a cadet, sir." "But you're supposed to pick me up." The cadet's jaw tightened. "I have my passenger manifest. Your name's not on it. Regulations say you can't get on the shuttle without authorization. Nobody but a flight officer can change that without signed orders from Starfleet Central Dispatch. I haven't received any order countermanding my manifest." McCoy stepped to one side and waved his arm toward the distant control offices. "All you have to do is walk across the bay to that communication station over there, contact Central Dispatch, and verify the change in your orders. How about that?" I'm not allowed to leave my ship, sir." "Not allowed? Your ship?" The medic tried to keep the blood running in his cold legs and feet. "How about if I stand guard while you go over there and contact dispatch?" "You're not authorized to do that, sir." Stiffening, McCoy pulled out his shirt. "What do you think this rag is? I'm a Starfleet ensign." "Medical corps, sir. Only Starfleet flight certified officers can countermand the orders of—" "Yes," McCoy interrupted, "but I outrank you." The feisty cadet raised his chin. "You can certainly order me around," he said, and cocked his head toward the warp shuttle. "But you can't order the ship around." Staring, McCoy leaned forward. "Are you saying I've got to have a blessing from Starfleet Command to stand next to a box with an engine on it while you walk across a loading bay?" "That's right." "Look, General Lissimo, I don't want to stand out here freezing until you find registration you like. Something's got to give." "Yes, sir. As soon as the person arrives who is on the manifest, we'll see if he brings any changes in orders for me." "Listen, Junior," McCoy blurted, "it's freezing out here. I was told to come to this bay and pick up this dog sled right here on this dock. I'm getting on board before I have to test my medical license by amputating my own toes. Stand aside." McCoy tucked his chin and took 3 steps up the stumpy boarding ramp, heading for the open hatchway. He could hear the heater whirring inside, but suddenly the cadet jumped up onto the top of the ramp, a clean 3-foot hop. "I'd rather not have to prevent you from doing so, sir," he said flatly, being careful of his tone. He stood with legs braced, blocking the hatchway. The country boy in Leonard McCoy made him think about duking it out with this cocky kid, because that was how a lot of folks handled things back in Georgia, where he came from. On the other hand, a lot of people back there needed medical care. He'd spent his younger days patching together the bruised and broken parts of other kids in his neighborhood. Now he was a medical intern on his way toward becoming a doctor. He gazed up the ramp at the stocky body and muscular thighs and arms of the younger fellow, elbows slightly bent. The kid had a wrestler's body, compact and strong, and eyes like amber tigers staring out of the dark grass. McCoy started to think he might be smarter not to have to patch himself together. With most of his weight on his aching foot, he held still for a moment. "I'd rather you didn't have to either. Maybe I'll just stand out here in the nice cold bay." "Good idea, sir." McCoy backed down the ramp. The cadet didn't move until the medic cleared the ramp. Then he got off too. "So," McCoy attempted, "when do you think the iron gate might go up and I could get on board?" "As soon as the person who's supposed to be transported gets here. Then we'll see if the manifest has been amended." "I guess I'll wait." "I guess you will." The cadet turned his back and attended to something inside an open mechanic's hatch. No matter how much McCoy stared in blustering anger at the spot right between the boy's shoulder blades, the cadet refused to note that he was being stared at. "What a snot!" the medic thought. This was one of those military types who not only followed rules but actually liked them. Probably came from a long line of soldiers. Could probably quote the rank, regiment, and serial number of his great-great-great-grandfather from the Light Brigade. Aha! Somebody was coming through the access tunnel from the main terminal. He could see a narrow form walking their way, casting shadows inside the tunnel. Finally! He kept his eyes on the lean form striding toward them. Narrow shoulders, long legs, no hat, but maybe a helmet. The newcomer stepped into the bright lights of the loading dock. A Vulcan, and not just any Vulcan either. This was a Vulcan he knew. Spock! What luck! "Oh, this trip is going to be fun, fun, fun!" He clapped his hands and rubbed them. He started polishing his wooden man jokes as he watched the young alien scientist approach. Like McCoy, the Vulcan was dressed in a typical Alaska silver Starfleet Academy uniform shirt. His black hair was cut in a helmet shape that had fooled McCoy under those shadows a moment ago, but now caught the loading lights in a single bright band. How strange it still was to see a Vulcan in a Starfleet uniform. Ensign Spock was the first Vulcan to choose Starfleet Academy over the Vulcan Science Academy, even after receiving scholarships to both. He was the first scientist to leave Vulcan for Starfleet. McCoy knew Vulcans kept pretty much themselves. They were content to spend their lives in study, preferring fact over philosophy, sticking close to the hard sciences. Just perfect for picking on. Maybe this wasn't going to be such a boring trip after all. McCoy called across the loading bay, "Ensign Spock! How charming and inspiring to see you again. You're looking as chipper as ever. I'm glad you're here." "Ensign McCoy, are you going to Colony Cambria for the Starfleet Academy Science Conference?" "That's right. Medical division seminars on the effects of life in space and on alien worlds. You know the type of place I mean. Hot, dry, thin air, not enough moisture for a camel, places where no living thing was ever meant to live. Oh, yes, I forgot. Vulcan's a little like that, isn't it?" The young Vulcan paused and frowned at him. "In some regions. Have you cleared with Starfleet Dispatch?" "Yes, I have. I was told to report to this shuttle because it's scheduled to go there anyway, so I wouldn't have to wait for a regular Federation transport, but Corporal Goosestep over there wouldn't let me on board. Something about regulations." "Cadet, not corporal." Ensign Spock looked at the young man, who silently waited for them. The cadet matched Spock's stony face with his own. Spock drew his pin-straight brows together. His mushroom complexion and triangular features were etched by the bright dock lights, as if drawn in sharp pencil. "I am Ensign Spock," he said. Specify the point of contention, please, Cadet." The cadet stepped forward. "Sir, the Starfleet Transport Code specifies that no one shall board a fueled fleet warp vessel without specific confirmation from Central Dispatch." "But I do have confirmation," McCoy insisted. Spock looked at him. "What is the code number on your authorization to take this scout?" Glaring back at him, McCoy said, "I didn't memorize it." Unimpressed, Spock turned away from him and back to the pilot. "Good work, Cadet." "Thank you, sir." Ignoring the infuriated medic behind him, Spock stepped to the young man and held out a leather pouch. "This is your new flight order packet. You are to depart immediately for Colony Cambria with myself and Ensign McCoy as your passengers. You are to follow your regularly scheduled flight route, including all scheduled stops. Spock stepped past the cadet. McCoy followed him closely, determined to get on board that nice, warm vehicle, even if he had to do it with a Vulcan as his guard. He cast the kid a so-there glower as he passed him, but the cadet followed him, got in front, and once again blocked the way. "Sir," the cadet said, raising his voice, "I protest." Turning to the 17-year-old, Spock crooked an eyebrow at him. I beg your pardon." "I protest, sir." The cadet went to even stiffer attention. "I have my assignment, and respectfully, you are not it." Squaring off with the boy, Ensign Spock was suddenly more imposing than he first appeared. "Are you defying this change in orders?" "If necessary, sir." "What is your name?" "Cadet Kirk, sir. And until I'm officially informed of a change in plans by Starfleet Dispatch, this warp shuttle isn't leaving." Starfleet Academy, Cadet Kirk, Chapter 2. "Explain that immediately," the Vulcan ordered. The fiery young cadet obviously didn't like having to talk back to someone who outranked him, although he hadn't had much trouble talking back to McCoy. Evidently, he wasn't impressed by medics, but the senior-ranking scientist bothered him, and Vulcans had that naturally intimidating manner about them. "Sir," the cadet insisted, "I know who my passenger is supposed to be, and neither of you is he. I'm supposed to be transporting the keynote speaker to the conference." The Vulcan tipped his head as if he wasn't sure he heard right. "You were supposed to transport Dr. Richard Daystrom, head of the United Federation of Planets Computer Science Department, in this craft?" "The Spitfire is the biggest warp craft I'm ready to fly, sir." McCoy stepped between them. "And Dr. Richard Daystrom, the most famous computer genius of our time, is supposed to get on this boat so you can drive him around? How did that happen?" The cadet's chalk-mark eyebrows shot together. "I got top grades in all my subjects. I gave up my weekends. I scored highest in the pre-flight test for warp rating. This is my—" He stopped, suddenly uneasy in front of them, especially the Vulcan, who obviously wasn't impressed. "Reward?" McCoy filled in. "Well, yes. Only one cadet every semester gets this. There isn't supposed to be anybody on board but Dr. Daystrom and his assistant. I'm supposed to take him to the colony, then escort him around. It's going to be in all the news. Until I'm officially informed of a change, I'm going to resist leaving here." Ensign Spock's voice was crisp. His black eyes were severe. "Cadet, you are being informed. I am informing you. Check the orders packet." The cadet shifted his eyes to the leather pouch and opened it. Silently and unhappily, he read it. He paced off a few steps. His permanent position of attention lost some of its stiffness. "Well," Spock clasped his hands behind his back. Cadet Kirk hesitantly faced him again. Red-faced and white-knuckled, his face grim, he shoved the orders back into the packet. "Dr. Daystrom has been detained several hours. I'm supposed to take you to the colony, then wait there for further orders." He seemed to feel he'd been cheated. His anger showed plainly. He wouldn't be opening the door for famous Dr. Daystrom. He wouldn't be in the news tomorrow. Shoving the packet against Spock's chest, the cadet stepped past them both and snapped, "Permission to board." The Spitfire hummed with energy. Its impulse engines powered up for the ride out of the solar system. Waiting quietly in back were the warp engines, which would allow the little craft to jump beyond the speed of light and go very far indeed. After leaving the loading dock, the small vessel hovered outside of Starbase 1's giant turning spool of metal and lights. They were waiting for clearance to depart from the solar system. Warp travel had been used for almost a century, but it was still somewhat of a technical marvel. Some aspects of technology used by Starfleet still made McCoy nervous. He wasn't quite ready to trust some of the contraptions that others took for granted. Suspicious that this Cadet Kirk was all steam and no thrust, McCoy slipped forward to the cockpit and stuck his head in. "Is there a regulation against my sitting up here?" "None that I know of," Cadet Kirk said frostily. He sat like a ramrod in the pilot's seat. He implied that if there were such a regulation, he'd use it to keep away from the two passengers who had ruined his reward. He touched the communications grid. "This is Starfleet Zodiac Spitfire, 916 Delta India Yankee, departing for Colony Cambria, standard spaceways. We'll make contact with Junction Buoy 2993 in the Agira Basin. ETA is 0830 hours. Mark. Request clearance to depart. From Starfleet Flight Control, a gravelly voice chipped back over the comm signal. Zodiac 916, Delta India Yankee, this is the Dockmaster. You're cleared for launch on Space Lane Charlie 4, Vector 25, no wake speed. Roger that. McCoy sat down in the co-pilot seat. What does that mean? It's our angle of takeoff out of the solar system, so we don't hit anybody else coming or going from Earth. What's no wake? It's an old term that came up from days of steamships and engine-driven vessels on water. It means going slow enough that you don't disturb other vessels. In this case, slowly enough to turn or stop quickly. There are lots of other vessels coming and going. We have to be careful not to hit any of them. Cadet Kirk pinched his lips together. You a doctor? I'm a medic. I won't be a full-fledged physician until I finish up at Starfleet Medical. Then I'll be signing on a ship someplace. Cadet Kirk. Yes, sir. I was just thinking you look familiar. Kirk, I know. Didn't you knock me upside down during a football game back at the Academy? Was that you? Sure it was. You cost me my winter break, Buster. Unaffected, the cadet tossed off a polite, sorry, sir. But he wasn't sorry. McCoy frowned, but dropped the subject. What kind of vessel is this? It's a Zodiac-class interstellar warp shuttle, sir. Cadet Kirk ground his words out. He obviously wasn't in a mood to talk about the transport after McCoy's insults. His face was still red under the toast-blonde wisp of hair that fell over his brow. McCoy glanced around, back into the main cabin, where Ensign Spock sat reading a manual of some kind. Looks pretty chunky to me. Hope it holds together. It will. The young man twisted in his seat and pointed at the 2 rows of elbow-shaped supports running along the deck where the side bulkheads met the carpet. Those beam brackets are the old-style knees, made of heavy-duty cast rhodium. Above that, you can see the clinker plating, with strakes overlapping like roof shingles. Most of the newer transports are made with flush plating set edge to edge. The clinker plating is stronger. I wrote a paper on it 2 months ago. This crate, he went on, is exactly that, a crate. No comforts or amenities, and there are only 2 joiner bulkheads, which are bulkheads that don't contribute to the strength of the hull. No cabin walls and dividers to add weight. McCoy turned and watched the cadet, who was concentrating very hard on his piloting. On the wide forward screen, the moon rolled by like a big beach ball. There was no real window, but instead a screen that pretended to be a window, showing them what was in front of them. The screen could be switched to show the aft view also, and they would be able to look at whatever they were flying away from. Soon the cadet gained the nerve to pilot the ship faster and faster at sublight power, and the planets began to wheel by on the curved course that would take them out of the solar system. They were taking a flight path that ran along the plane of the ecliptic, the same imaginary pie plate the planet circled on. They could go down or up from that circle, but other ships might be using those flight paths. Earth's sister planets, the others circling the sun, were all in different places, but on this particular flight path, the Spitfire did pass a couple of them. The huge streaked ball of Jupiter, the gray-blue yarn of Uranus, these were among the first planets every Earth child learned. How do you know so much about this particular crate? McCoy asked. I slept here last night, Cadet Kirk said. Why would you do a thing like that? Because I wanted to get the feel of the craft. Couldn't you get the feel of it just by driving it? That's not what I mean. All right, the medic allowed. Explain what you mean. The cadet seemed uneasy at having to clarify his feelings. Ships have personality. Oh, I get it. That thing sailors talk about. How the ship's got some kind of life and pulse and like that. Identity. Aren't all ships of a certain design built exactly alike? No matter how identically the parts are made, Cadet Kirk said, when they're attached to each other, there are always slight differences. That's why every vessel is individually tested and rated for its own tolerance levels. 2 ships that seem identical might have different safe top speeds, or different turning stress levels or braking capabilities. But all those are things you learn from actually driving, McCoy pointed out. What does sleeping in here do for you? It lets the ship know I'm here, the cadet told him slowly. There's a bond between a ship and her crew. How hard you'll fight for each other. How much of a pounding you'll take for each other. You get attached. It matters. McCoy grunted. Buster, he said, I wouldn't get that attached to my own liver. He was getting the idea that this cadet not only flew this bucket, but liked the bucket. McCoy thought he'd better be more careful about what comments he made about the Spitfire. So, he went on, how long have you been making this run? About 20 minutes, sir. Sitting bolt upright, McCoy stared at him. 20 minutes? Are you telling me you've never piloted into deep space before? That's correct, sir. Not alone, anyway. Grasping the arms of his seat, McCoy sat straight up. Turn this thing around!